Hi, I'm Trivial Punk, and you're listening to The Labors of Hell, Part 3. Can we stop falling? Please! An exasperated Jeremy breathed between huge gulps of air, his shaking hands steadying as the adrenaline ebbed. But it's so much quicker, the red-faced man shot back with a giggle of delight. What, are you afraid you'll die and wind up here? He said, sticking his tongue out at Jeremy. Returning the gesture, Jeremy painted a stern frown on his face. Finally, the moment caught up with him, and his expression cracked into gales of laughter. After a guffaw's breadth of time, they were both on their backs, panting in the squishy something. So, what on earth are we lying on? Skin! Unfortunately, Jeremy was screamed out, so his revulsion could only express itself through the truly horrified expression that crawled itself across his face. If skin could crawl, then he was sure his would be doing a very neat impression of the man he'd recently seen thrashing in a pool of his own blood. Well, mostly. This is the room where the greedy gather to buy and sell themselves. This pile is the remnants of those that sold their mouse and could no longer wheel and deal. Who knows, though? One of their associates could always buy one for them. Shaking with the most sincere laugh Jeremy had heard yet, he continued. That's it. Here your worst enemy is your best friend, and the currency is pure platinum. Shining coins spilled forth from his cupped hands. You can literally own someone else, if you can get a good deal for your parts and buy them back later, at a reduced price. Supply and demand, you know. A man without a liver will pay a lot to end his self-imposed agony. Provided, of course, that it's a working liver. It's a real meat market. A disgusted sigh and a quick scramble down a pile of flesh later, Jeremy was propositioned by a torso. Some nice legs you got there, boy. I'll give you 30 platinum for him. Bah! Interjected another voice. Good pair of legs are worth at least twice that. I'll give you 100 for the set if you throw in an arm. You already have 5. Coughed the first voice. I don't have any. That's your business. I saw the deal you got. Tell you what, with some of that, I'll give you a full set for 200. Preposterous! You wouldn't have to keep wriggling away like a pathetic limp-livered inchworm. Ugh, these things barely count as human. Although the price these coins would fetch. How much would he really miss one arm? Jeremy shook his head in disgust. Ugh, can we go soon? Why? The fedora man asked darkly. Tempted. The grin that spread across his sharp, gaping mouth chilled Jeremy to the core. Don't worry, you don't belong here. Well, isn't that a relief? Stammered Jeremy, heart pounding in his ears. Still, I can't help feeling that there, but for the grace of God go I. That grin just wouldn't dissipate. Oh, he had nothing to do with it. More limbless, sagging effigies were swarming to the fresh bodies. A cacophony of shouting mouths and grasping, stroking hands clawed at them both, appraising and applauding their valuables. Get back, you pathetic creatures! The fedored man roared. Red skin stretched over twisting muscle, his whole body swelled, possessed of a dark, terrible power. His very posture gave off an aura of pure destructive potential. As the words left his lips, fire flared around him, burning and scattering the crowd. There, he said, masking himself in a calm demeanor once more. It's quite rude to shout, and worse still, to crowd. Chuckling in an attempt to break the viscous tension. Come along, Jeremy. I think you'll find the next apartment just as interesting as this one. If such things interest you. Feet shuffling and shoulders locked, Jeremy followed with the memory of that moment of anger seared deep into his mind. Clearly, this wasn't a car salesman to be trifled with. The extended warranty was looking more appealing every second. They made their way towards what Jeremy could only assume was the exit, with the scarecrow effigies of humanity giving them a much wider berth. Ducking through another hole in the wall and down another flight of stairs. Made of what he no longer cared what. They broke through the gloom into a large field. Inside a cave. I'm really not surprised, Jeremy mused. Let's hope you've not lost the ability to be so, though. It tends to make existence much more interesting. Following the man closely, Jeremy was led into a structure that gave the impression, in every way, of a large barn. A large barn full of huge insects. Ugh, what on earth? No, actually. But they are a distant relative to the common flea. Notice the strong coiled legs. Perfect for jumping! Distant was right. They were absolutely revolting. Not that fleas are a picture of comely perfection, Jeremy reminded himself. Their entire hunched form was covered in a layer of stiff hairs. 2 large milky eyes sat forward on faces that were little more than long proboscises tipped with gaping maws, from which an inner mouth would occasionally stretch and display rows and rows of small, jagged teeth. Jeremy swallowed hard at the realization that his entire arm could easily fit up one of those revolting orifices. Wings sprouted and flapped under a protruding organ he didn't recognize. A sensory organ? It seemed likely considering how their relatives hunted and fed. By the shape of the head and the wings, I'm guessing these things fly. Brilliant, Holmes! The red-faced man snapped as he mounted one of the things. Hop on, we're burning sulfur. Swallowing revulsion and not a little terror, he swung into place behind the man and hung on. Okay, steering one of these things can be a bit tricky, but here we go! While he hadn't been paying attention, the roof had disappeared. A hurricane of wing beats buffeted them as the creatures grasped the opportunity to escape. Jeremy clutched all the more frantically to the disgusting creature's back. Oh, the stable hands will be furious. It'll take them forever to get them all back. Ah, well. Laughing like a maniac, the man pulled on one of the finer hairs close to the creature's mystery sense organ. Jeremy felt like he'd been struck. Hard. The ground sprinted away below them. The creature latched onto a crack in the wall and set itself for another titanic leap. Clutching onto life itself, Jeremy managed to weak. It grapples to things with its mouth? Wouldn't that make it hard to feed if it damaged itself in the process? Anything to take your mind off the dizzying jumps, eh? Well, actually, no. That's an appendage. It doesn't eat with that. This ride isn't free. The creature is accepting our nourishment as payment. See? That's why I'm not actually holding on. Horrified, Jeremy jerked his arms back. Tiny hairs had wormed their way under his skin, dripping blood and toxin as they tore away at his flesh. It's very safe. You're quite secure. With that, Jeremy finally noticed the larger one snaking away from the arteries in his legs. Be it the shock or the blood loss, he'd seen too much. Consciousness left him and he fainted out cold, engulfed in laughter. He opened his eyes to find the ceiling of his bedroom staring back at him. His legs were wrapped and splayed within the sheets and comforters, one under the other. After a few minutes, his heart finally began to slow its frenzied beating. Struggling out of bed, he found that one of his feet had fallen asleep from the awkward position. He limped his bleary-eyed way to the bathroom. God, what a dream. Reaching into the medicine cabinet, he pulled out his toothbrush and toothpaste and squeaked the faucet on. Steadying himself against the counter with one hand, he began the doldrumous task of brushing his teeth. Oh! Blood red mingled with the white of his toothpaste. He'd never been much for flossing. He stared, horrified, at the reflection in the mirror. A crimson tide was welling from deep within his mouth and had started gushing forth. His reflection was a fountain of blood, but its eyes were smiling, laughing. It reached forward and opened the door to the medicine cabinet. Jeremy followed suit, dragged along in the eddying tides of insatiable, revolted curiosity. Where a shelf had been moments earlier, there was nothing. Literally nothing. A shapeless void assaulted Jeremy's senses. He was overwhelmed, staring until he saw something lying just beyond it. A familiar chuckle filled his ears as he fought his way through the inky emptiness. Confusing visions swam back to him. And that's where we're going to end this segment. And next time we'll wrap up the labors of hell. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the other side.